Welcome back, listeners. I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. Today, we have a special guest with me, and I've been waiting so long to speak with him, Chris Boardman, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his experience with PTSD and what's been going on. Chris, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And thank you for your patience. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. I was once told that you didn't choose music, music chose you. I've been a professional musician now I'm into my sixth decade as a working musician. And through those years, I've been primarily known for scoring movies. I mean, big budget Hollywood films like Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, Payback with Mel Gibson, Meet Joe Black, Spy Kids. You know, the list is pretty long. I was busy for a long time. I also played the piano since I was 4 years old, and I made my living at music until the probably 2010, 2012. And then I segued into the technology field and then academia. So that's basically my background. And as it relates to PTSD, I taught at a major university from 2012 to 2018. And at the end of that tenure, my boss tried to intimidate me in a contract negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
And I confronted him at the time, not having any awareness of his anger issues.
Yeah.
And because he was trying to do something that he was not legally able to do. He wanted to operate outside the confines of his role and responsibilities to intimidate me. And he erupted in a narcissistic rage, which it took me a while to figure that one out. But it was so terrifying. His eyes went black, pupils dilated, all the blood drained out of his face, his facial muscles became taut. And what I subsequently learned, but I pierced the veil of narcissism to see that there was actually nobody there. And narcissists, they are very glib, very charming and manipulative. And what they want to hide against is the fact that they have no self-worth. So I had pierced that veil, and he just erupted at me. I stood up, turned around, walked out at the door, and never spoke to him again.
Yeah.
Because to this day, I believe that if he had a weapon, I could be dead. That's how terrifying this situation was for me. So I had to work for him for another year to honor my contract, and I avoided him. And I would be terrified to walk out on campus. So I would always check the parking lot to see if his car was there before I ventured outside. And it wasn't for a year afterwards that I opened up my email. I had about 2 months left on my contract, and his name appeared in my inbox erroneously, but nonetheless, there was an email from his office to my inbox, and it sent me into a panic attack. And I'm sitting there holding my head in my hands, like trying to figure out what in the world to do, how to cope with this. And I heard my wife talking on the phone, and I knew that there was something wrong. So I walked into the kitchen to talk to her, and she hung up the phone and said that was my brother. His 19-year-old stepson had committed suicide the night before.
Oh my goodness.
And I was convinced it was an at-risk nephew who was drugging and drinking and really struggling with his life. I couldn't put it together which nephew it was. And I realized that I had a problem that I was not addressing. I was just completely unaware that I was in full-blown PTSD, and I had no awareness of it. And so So when I left the university, I spent my life writing music for, Broadway, for musical variety television, for records, for films, you know, and that's who I am and that's what I do. And I said, well, how do I really want to spend my time? And I said, well, let's investigate writing something for the concert hall,
Yeah.
because that's something I had never done before. So to me, it was just like another challenge, another problem to solve. Oh, that sounds like fun. Let's go down that road. So I was struggling to find a theme to base this new piece of music on. And then there was a news account that there was a shooting at the Borderline Bar in Westlake, California. This was the November 2018. And 13 people died and 16 people were injured.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spent my life, the thing about writing film music is I've spent decades manipulating people's emotions using music. That's
Right.
the job. That's the job of a film composer, is to
Okay.
use music to accompany a story, to support or direct an audience's emotional response.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay.
you see a romantic scene and two people are embracing, they start to kiss. Well, there's this big swell in the orchestra, right? That's
Right. Yeah.
an example of how music can support and intensify the emotions that people are watching on screen and the story that is being told. So when this shooting happened, I realized that understanding my gap in understanding of my own symptoms and my own situation, I realized that there was a gap in the culture where people either are unaware or they don't want to talk about their symptoms, so they isolate,
Mm-hmm.
which only exacerbates the intensity of the situation, and they don't want to talk about it because it re-triggers the event when
Right. Correct.
when it's attached to trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, there's this big gap between the people who suffer and the people who don't, who are not aware, who have no experience with it, and that I could use my musical storytelling skills to connect those two groups of people
Yeah.
and create a broader understanding
Yeah.
of what each group, each constituent is feeling, and hopefully create a broader awareness and
Mm-hmm.
of trauma and PTSD, uh, to help remove the stigma associated with mental health, so
Right.
that people could talk about it freely
Mm-hmm.
and openly, and for the people who suffer to be able to say it's okay for me to talk about it, and to be able to be strong enough and resilient enough to be able to say, oh, this person will listen to me, or this person won't listen to me, I'm not going to get what I need, and then seek out the help that they need. So that's what I'm doing now. There's more to it now, but you look like you have a question.
Yeah. I wanted to know, what, in your opinion, would you say that music could play a very beneficial factor into healing as well?
Oh, it's remarkable. Uh, so just to jump from there to answer your question, the I created a project that I called the missing link,
Mm-hmm.
and that missing link is the connection between people, right?
Yeah.
So I created a 60-minute concert event with a film and 5 live actors on stage that tells the story of 2 families struggling with a school shooting followed by the pandemic. And the whole point of this is to get inside of their lives and then instill hope in the audience. As an
Mm-hmm.
adjunct to that is what I call an outreach program, which combines, to answer your question, combines music, movement, and breathing to alleviate the onset of anxiety and depression symptoms. Basically, the idea originally was to get an audience to participate, give,
Mm-hmm.
it was focused on school, to give students something that they could participate with as
Yeah.
opposed to being talked at,
Right.
to make it relevant for their lives. as
Yes.
opposed to just being sitting there passively and hearing, some grandpa like me yakking about what you should and shouldn't do. Right? That doesn't go very far with 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
So throughout the development of this part of the development of this outreach program entailed me doing an enormous amount of research about brain function.
Mhm.
And what I discovered, to answer your question specifically, is music is an enormously powerful tool that can be used in healing.
Yes.
Because it all relates to, I'll get a little technical here for a second, but it relates, our brains, every experiential data, any sort of sensory data that is received, our brain remembers it from the moment we are born until the moment we die. And all of those memories are stored in the hippocampus, which is a part of your brain.
Yeah.
All right. So in the case of trauma, well, actually, I'm jumping ahead. Music that's related to a specific emotional experience will trigger a memory of that experience. So if it's a negative experience and that piece of music is attached, you'll feel uncomfortable because your brain is operating independent of your conscious thought to remind you of that experience. If you flip that on its head, go 180 degrees, and you say, this piece of music reminds me of falling in love.
Right.
This piece of music reminds me of some significant positive event in my life. Right? When you listen to that piece of music, it will trigger that memory. And that memory will then get sent to what's called the amygdala, which is kind of judges the veracity of these memories. Sometimes, in the case of PTSD and trauma, those memories get distorted and the amygdala misinterprets the information and then can go crazy and say, oh, we're, danger, Will Robinson, we're under attack, we're under threat, we have to prepare to defend ourselves. That's what happens in a PTSD response. It's taking a memory from the past and your brain interprets it as happening in the present moment.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so that's all the technical stuff behind all of that. Music can counteract that physiological and neurological response.
Okay, and can you explain further what that means?
Well, what that means is, from a technical point of view, there's two parts of it. There's the piece of music that's attached to a positive memory, which is going to send a different signal to the amygdala that says, oh, this is positive, I feel good. It'll release endorphins and serotonin and dopamine to make you feel better, right? That's in direct contrast to the fight-flight response, which is triggered when you're under threat, right? And by the way, the fight-flight response happens automatically. It's not something that you can consciously control. Right?
Yeah,
so having a tool, a piece of music that makes you remember a specific positive event will send a different signal that counteracts the negative signal that is being generated by depression or anxiety or a depressive episode.
So is that what you did when you were overcoming this traumatic?
No, not necessarily. No, I did and I didn't. In my case specifically, have you ever heard the term turning pain into purpose?
Yes, I have.
Yes. Okay. So my way of dealing, when I decided I wanted to do this project, I would use focusing on that project as a way of counteracting the fear and the negative emotions that I would feel on occasion throughout that process. So it became my religion to a certain extent, because I would just go to work every day, and as long as I was paying attention to what I was trying to build, then then I was cool. I
Yeah.
wasn't like going off the deep end or kind of navigating through all this insanity. So that's what I did. But through the course of this, what I did this research. I read countless academic articles and studies
Mhm.
to be able to understand how the brain works and what happens that triggers the fight flight response, what happens to your body. And then mindfulness is like a big deal these days. People talk about breathing and listening to music and all the rest of it. That's all well and good. But my take is, if the music that they're listening to is not relative to their experience,
Mhm.
i.e., music from Asia, let's say. If you're
Right.
not an Asian person, if you haven't grown up with that as part of your culture,
Mhm.
you're going to have to make a leap of faith to adopt that music as being relevant to your experience, right?
Right. That's understandable.
Right. So what I learned in my research was that the body reacts physiologically to music.
Mhm.
It creates physiological processes, which is
Yeah.
the same thing that Asian music does in mindfulness. But my thinking is if there's two ways to look at this. If you're anxious, if you listen to a slow piece of music and you breathe with that piece of music, your heart rate is going to go down, your blood pressure is going to go down
Yeah.
involuntarily.
Mhm.
That's the key. It's involuntary. If you are depressed, if you're sad, if you feel like you're in the doldrums, if you listen to a piece of dance music, let's say, as an
Mhm.
example, and you get up and you move and you're focused on body movement and body awareness, along with that music, with that tempo, your body is going to change as a result and have a different physiological reaction.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
It's kind of like a no-brainer, but
Yeah.
I've yet to hear anybody talk about all these different aspects
Mhm.
simultaneously, right?
Right. Right.
So the third part of this uh, methodology is to incorporate a pre-shot routine. Now, if you look at Michael Jordan, or every time he shoots a free throw, he physically does exactly the same thing
Mhm.
every time without fail. You look at Tiger Woods, he hasn't changed his pre-shot routine since he was probably 9 years old.
Uh-huh.
And he does it exactly the same way. He looks down the line of sight, takes 2 practice swings, looks at it again, sits down, addresses the ball, and he goes.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Yeah.
if you look at any high performing individual, like in a batter's box, you see all these
Mhm.
guys, saying a prayer or doing whatever they do.
Yeah.
What that ritualistic movement does is it quiets the mind and reduces
Mhm.
the self-talk,
Yeah.
and so that you're present in the moment.
Yeah.
You're not letting your mind go. I used to tell my students, it was like, if you have an idea in your head and you don't get it out of your body, it's like a marble rolling around in a bucket. It's just it'll just keep going and going and going and going. So
Right.
so what I've developed is examples of an exercise that teaches methods as opposed to specific things to do,
Mhm.
so that the individual can personalize the music, the motion, the breathing technique to make it relevant to them and make
Right.
it enjoyable. And that personalization promotes engagement, as opposed to me being, as I said before, prescriptive,
Mhm.
which says you have to do it this way and this is the way you have to do it, and I'll show you. You have to do it exactly. I don't believe that, especially in the TikTok world.
Right.
People want to be engaged in their experience in some fashion.
Mhm.
So where this is at the moment is I've just launched a beta program to
Mhm.
test this methodology, and we can get to that in a minute. But my goal is to spread this to anyone, allow anyone who really needs this or wants to engage to
Mhm.
participate. This is not about
Absolutely.
selling a course. It's not about any of that. It's about saying, we sit in a time in human history where 20 to 25% of Americans currently have diagnosable mental illness symptoms.
Hmm.
That's more than 60 million people.
Yes.
And the demand for traditional therapy is far outweighs the ability to treat,
Right.
especially amongst teenagers.
Yeah.
And they have no place to go, and they
Yeah.
have no idea where to turn. So this is not necessarily a treatment for bipolar or a serious medical condition. This is
Right.
just a toolkit that somebody can use when, oh, I'm starting to feel antsy. Oh, well, if I
Yeah.
just listen to this piece of music, or I have this playlist together that is intended to suit that purpose,
Yeah.
then they'll have something immediately to be able to hold on to, as opposed to feeling lost and disempowered, and left to their own devices and without having any knowledge of where to turn.
Yeah. And I would definitely be interested in that myself. Like, can
Cool.
you go into a little bit more? So if someone who is, trying to cope with this, how do they get a hold of you?
Well,
Or
I'm easily found on social media, but the it's a little bit of a kind of a long URL, but it's the missing link
Mhm.
at dot mykajabi, Kajabi, and I can give you that URL. And it's free to sign up. And because I'm dealing with kids, there's an
Mhm.
age field,
Yeah.
because I don't feel comfortable with allowing minors to
Right.
be a part of this without parental approval.
Yeah.
So it's basically you opt in, and then you can have access to the course. And the course is actually 4 modules
Okay.
that are just examples. This is what you do. Here's an example. Let's do it together.
Okay.
That and explains how you can use this concept and customize it to your own tastes to
Hmm.
create your own program that you can rely on and
Yeah.
modify as time goes on. Now there's a link to there's another URL, Chris Boardman Courses,
Hmm.
ChrisBoardmanCourses.com. That
Okay.
has that I do all sorts of other things. I sell online film scoring courses, and I've got a book coming out, and all kinds of other stuff is available on that website. But there is a link to there's an opt-in field on that homepage. So
Wow. That's amazing.
yeah, well, yes, what I do. This is what I do.
That is phenomenal. Like, and then I know in your bio, it also spoke about Hollywood. I mean, is that something that you can kind of give us a little bit of information on what your
Yeah,
time
well,
in Hollywood was like?
sure. I mean, it's I've worked daily in Hollywood for decades, so I have a
Hmm.
lot of credits, and I kind of characterize as like carry around with me. It's got really have very
Yeah.
little to what I'm doing today, but um, it was a good run. It was a good
Hmm.
run, and then I just got kind of fed up with it and didn't like the people anymore, and I decided to go do something else. But that being said, I was nominated for an Oscar for my work on the film The Color Purple with Quincy Jones.
Oh, wow.
Won 6 Emmy Awards, had 13 Emmy nominations for my work in musical variety television, working
Hmm.
with people like Julie Andrews and Shirley MacLaine, and all those kinds of, affectionately call them vaudeville performers,
Hmm.
because this is the late 70s through the 80s. I've worked on more than 140 films in my career, scored uh, Payback for Mel Gibson, and worked on Spy Kids,
Hmm.
and did a lot of big films, the Die Hard series, the Lethal Weapon series. Uh, did a film called Swing Kids in the early 90s that went on to spawn a swing dance craze across America, had a jazz
Yeah.
record on the charts for 160 weeks. I was in a contemporary jazz group in the 80s called
Uh-huh.
Wishful Thinking with David Garibaldi, who plays the original drummer in Tower of Power. Uh,
Mhm.
I did 3 records with them. I've done 3 albums as a solo artist beyond that.
Okay.
And so yeah, I had this employable skill of being
Yeah.
able to write orchestral music really fast,
Oh,
and
wow.
so that kept me busy for a long, long time.
That is phenomenal. So, what age were you when you started realizing that music was your passion? Like, I would
Well,
assume
yeah,
your passion.
well, like I kind of started this out. Music chose me. I didn't choose music.
Hmm.
And there's in the 50s, this is just kind of a little backstory. In the 50s, tonsillectomies were very popular. If you had tonsillitis,
Hmm.
antibiotics hadn't really progressed at that time. So the
Yeah.
way of treating a tonsillitis was to whack out your tonsils.
Hmm.
And so my brother, who was a couple of years older than I was, he was 5 and I was 3.
Hmm.
He had chronic tonsillitis, so my parents made the decision to have his tonsils removed. For some unknown reason, which I never got a straight answer to, they decided that I should have my tonsils out at the same time, even though I was healthy.
Hmm. Yeah.
So my brother goes in and he comes back out, and I go into the operating room, and I don't come back, and I don't come back. And my poor mom's like freaking out, what's going on?
Yeah.
And the doctor came out and said, well, it's really good that you brought him in now, because his adenoids were growing abnormally into his inner ear, and he would have been totally deaf by this age
Wow.
6 or 7, with such a slow loss of hearing that by the time you notice a hearing loss, there would be nothing that could be done. And
Wow.
6 months later, my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday. It was my 4th birthday, mind you.
Hmm.
And and I said, I want a piano. Now there was no
Yeah.
music. There was no music in the house at all.
Hmm.
My dad was a scientist. He was an engineer,
Yeah.
and so they rented a piano, and the piano arrived, and I started plunking out melodies at 4 years old, the day the
Yeah.
piano arrived. And so then, there's a lot more to this story, but that's how it began at age 4. You know.
Wow. You are just, whew, you're just so much is going on. I could just like speak to you for hours.
Well, we'll have to try this again sometime.
Yeah. So, what else would you want to add to the listeners out here? Like, what's a special message that you would like to give them?
Um, Interesting question. I mean, I got divorced, separated, and then subsequently divorced in 1986.
Hmm.
And at the time, my career was on fire. I got an Academy Award, won a second or third Emmy Award by this time, and I had a hit record on jazz radio.
Hmm.
And so it's like I'm on this rocket ship ride. And I got divorced, and I became a single parent
Yeah.
overnight to a
Hmm.
4-year-old boy. And I became clinically depressed
Hmm.
to the point of having suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And my life fell apart. So it was it was kind of like the scale had gone like this,
Yeah.
to where on the career side, everything is like rocking. But on the personal side, it was just, I had no skills to be able to deal with that kind of emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to a new book at that time called Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns.
Hmm.
And it was the beginnings of behavioral cognitive therapy, which
Okay.
didn't exist prior to that.
Hmm.
And parting words to people who struggle is, first of all, you got to get it out of your body.
Yeah.
Get those feelings out of your body. This is the basis of behavioral cognitive therapy, is to
Absolutely.
say, if you're feeling, I'm a horrible person because, right?
Hmm.
Write that down on a piece of paper, and then come back and refute that when you're
Hmm.
not in the throes of that mindset. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And that worked tremendous. I mean, I was committed to it. So I, just went into it whole hog. So if a parting thought would be to say, well, this is a quote from Quincy Jones. You know, he's famous for saying, my self-worth is not predicated on your justification of me.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is to say that if you're struggling, that's just something that's happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so if you keep that in mind and you can separate the two and realize that you're a whole person, regardless of what's happening for you, you don't have to let that struggle define you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
As a way to say, okay, well, if I have the right tools, be it cognitive behavioral therapy or some other sort of therapy, or even the missing link course,
mm-hmm.
then I have a tool that I can use to be able to deal with the problem.
Right.
Without letting the problem create a self-image.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important, because it's worked for me. I've struggled with it all my life, and maybe that's because I'm empathetic,
mm-hmm.
you know, by nature, that I'm sensitive to all of this,
right,
by nature. So it's been a constant thread. And once, you know, after I became a single parent, I was entered into psychotherapy.
mm-hmm.
I was in it for 3 years, and I learned, you know, I actively learned skills
Clearly,
to be
yeah,
able to deal with these issues,
yeah,
right? Because if
yeah,
you know, and this is why I'm so committed to teenagers today
mm-hmm.
and their struggles, because, you know, if you take a 30,000-foot view of where we stand in human history, humans have never been in this situation before, ever.
Yeah.
It is a tumultuous time of disruption.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we've got AI to contend with. We had smartphones 15 years ago. You know, I originally was trained writing with paper and pencil for live orchestras.
Right.
And we've seen that morph and change as with publishing and the record business and even the TV and film business now, you know, Netflix and streaming and all the rest of this. So it's teenagers today, their parents are struggling just as much as me being like a grandparent age, a boomer.
Right.
You know, everybody's struggling. And
Yes.
these kids don't have any place to go because nobody's experienced it before.
Right.
Absolutely. And then you look at their parents, you know, who are
mm-hmm.
struggling as well. And
right.
then there's all this shame. Well, I should have my act together. You know, I should be able to deal with this, or applying coping skills that are not relevant to the challenges that you're facing today.
Right.
That's really that, you know, we all tend to want to use stuff that's worked before to relieve mm-hmm. our discomfort. Well, the reality of the situation is today we've never had to encounter this. So it's kind of a fool's errand to believe that a coping skill that worked 20 years ago is going to be relevant to the issues that we're dealing with today.
Right. Absolutely. Right? And how would you pinpoint if it's relevant to certain people? Like, is that just something that you...
Well, let's see, you know, here's the other thing is that there is no panacea. There is no silver bullet.
Okay.
You know, there's not, you know, the healthcare system in this country is more about profiting off of treating symptoms than curing people.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So it's you're not going to necessarily get that kind of silver bullet response, right. But yeah. We're conditioned to believe that you go to the doctor to fix you. Mm-hmm. Right. So understanding that dynamic, it just means you have to do the work.
Absolutely.
You can't make it, oh, fix me so I don't have to think about it.
Right.
You know, that isn't going to work at all. And but the crazy thing is if you understand that human beings are, number one, really good at survival. The
Hmm.
brain is really good at surviving. That's what its job is
Exactly.
is to
Yes.
for us to survive. And part of that survival as a species is depending on other people.
Hmm.
Prior to the 20th century, we were tribal people
Hmm.
for thousands of years,
Right.
right? And so to survive, we had to depend and be part of a community. Devices like the iPhone that I'm staring at right now
Uh-huh.
isolates us,
Right.
right? And then
Right.
there's this, because there's this disconnect and misunderstanding, there's or lack of awareness of the impact of that isolation. Is there can be shame, there can be insecurity, there can be imposter syndrome, there can be any
Yeah.
number of ways that you can react to not knowing,
Right. Absolutely.
and you feel like you're less than because you don't know.
No. Yeah.
The point I'm
Absolutely.
trying to make is if you accept that you're a whole person, that you have to do the work,
Hmm.
then it's easier to look at somebody else and say, if they're having a bad day, if they're grumpy or road rage or God knows what the issue is, they're suffering. They're
Yes.
lashing out as their way of surviving. And
Yeah.
you can
Absolutely.
look at them through a different lens and say, that person is suffering like I am,
Hmm.
as opposed to placing a negative judgment on their behavior or being fearful
Yeah.
of it. Because what it's basically doing is putting a mirror onto you
Yeah.
in terms of what you're
Absolutely.
going through that you don't want to acknowledge.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all kind of wrapped together. It's a kind of complex issue, but if you just get it out of your body and you accept that it's not your fault and there's no blame to be affixed to feeling this way,
Hmm.
then you can start taking it a moment at a time to
Yeah.
be able to string together more good moments than bad moments.
Absolutely. You are just so brilliant. I enjoy talking to you so
Well,
much.
I'm glad you let me rant and rave. This is something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. And, I did teach in a classroom for 6 years. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. I can definitely tell because I want to keep listening. I want to keep hearing more and more.
what?
Um, oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. You were going to say.
I was gonna say is I don't actually honestly I kind of
Uh,
forgot because
I have
I
a
like
tendency to,
the finish.
it's not uncommon for me to overwhelm people.
I guess I'm
So
like,
don't
what
feel,
was it spinning?
there's, it's, it's like I've spent the pandemic in every day for the last off and on. So I started at the Missing Link Project before the pandemic,
Mhm.
and I had gone down a path and was making really good progress, and then the pandemic hit and the whole thing stopped because it was
Yeah,
dependent upon groups of people coming together. And then I picked it up on Valentine's Day 2021. So this is the world that I live in at this point.
yeah,
And it's boy, talk about a growth experience.
yeah.
It's been quite a journey because I haven't had anybody really to hold my hand or lead my way through it.
Right,
And
right, and
so
I
it's
understand that.
it's been it's
Yes,
been this for years, but now that, especially when I really did the research and understood brain function
hmm,
and what are the processes, what are the different parts of the brain, and how music. This is something I knew anecdotally for years
right,
because I would do it instinctively in film when I would write a film score.
yeah,
But understanding the science behind it gives me great confidence that I can speak with authority
yeah,
about what those processes are and
yeah. I love
hopefully put it in a way that's accessible to people
it. Hmm.
that they can really figure, oh well, this, I I am different.
Yes,
I'm well aware of that. But by the same token, I'm just a guy trying to get through the day like everybody else.
absolutely,
Right?
and I can relate to that.
I don't have I refuse to be put on a pedestal.
Hmm.
for that
Mhm.
very reason. It's like with
Mhm.
all the incredible success that I had in my musical
Mhm.
Hollywood life, I always believed that there was somebody around the corner who was better than I was.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that's I take that same attitude towards this. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work for me.
Mhm.
And I've discovered that at this stage of my life, this is how I want to spend my time,
Right.
which is, being my age, you think about your own mortality and how many years you have left and all those
Right.
kinds of issues. And Quincy was a big influence on me. I first
Mhm.
worked with Quincy in 1978. And I,
Yeah.
and and so when asked, how do you do all the things that you do? His response was, well, this is 30 years ago. He said, well, you get 28,000 days.
Mhm.
And you think about that. So you live to be late 70s, 80 years old. That's 28,000 days. And his opinion is, I'm not going to waste one of them.
Right.
Right? I'm going to try and get the most value out of each and every day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? And so that's where I'm at in my life at this point, is to
Yeah.
say, I've got all of these different skills that I've amassed over these years by actively being curious and learning and personal growth and all that stuff. What I'm doing now is trying to coalesce all of that experience
Mhm.
in a way that leaves a lasting impact.
Absolutely.
You know?
You definitely will. I can tell. 'Cause you're a book of knowledge and wisdom. Like it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You're
I'm,
welcome. It's
I'm just,
been
like I say, this is just my life. This is how I'm trying to make it go. And if,
right.
and if I can help people, my mom, God bless her. She's, when I would be worried about making a living or where the next paycheck was coming from, being a freelancer, that's always an issue. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, don't, do what you love and the money will come, the money will
Come.
follow. Right.
Yep.
So that's what this whole experience is about, is to say, this is something I feel passionate about. This is something that I believe that I can accomplish. As grand as it is and seemingly unachievable to others, I've never let that stop me. So I'm not going to let it stop me now.
Yeah.
And we'll just, if I put good into the world, something good will come back.
Come back.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes.
One other thing I wanted to mention is I've written an autobiography,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a pre-order sign up opt-in on the Chris Boardman courses
Okay.
webpage,
Mm-hmm.
because I've worked with everybody from Quincy Jones and David Foster to Steven Spielberg, Mel Gibson, Shirley MacLaine, Bing Crosby, God
Oh.
knows whom. The list is really long, but
Uh-huh.
but it's I'm going to be releasing the book later in the year,
Okay.
uh, and it's basically a story of resilience and adaptation, which hopefully gives the reader
Mm-hmm.
the hope and the confidence that in these uncertain times, it's possible to navigate through and retain your humanity, retain yourself in the process.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And I'm definitely going to put all of your information in the description, but I would like to circle back
sure,
when
anytime.
when you get ready to release that book and speak with you again so we can
Yeah.
discuss that.
Well,
Absolutely.
well, let's just plan on it.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you again so much. And like I
Well, I
said,
hope you and your listeners find it helpful. And
oh
I'm
yeah, absolutely. I know I have. I definitely, I can't really
great.
speak for them. I think they will, but I 100% have, and I definitely look forward to
Great.
collaborating with
I'm accessible. So
you.
if
Yes.
somebody has a question or things, follow me on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and I'm happy to respond to questions as time permits. So
Okay. Yeah, and like I said, I will put all of your information, your
great.
LinkedIn, your Facebook. I'll put all that in the description as well. Is
All
there
right.
anything else that you wanted to add?
No, just thank you.
Thank you again so much. And again, everyone, this is It's All About Healing podcast. And today's interview was with Chris Boardman. Everything will be in the description box, and everyone stay blessed.